Good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome Barbara London by doing a brief presentation of who she is. Barbara is a curator, writer, and teacher from New York, investigating new media and sound art since the 1970s. She's best known for funding the video collection at MoMA, New York. She organized at the MoMA Museum more than 500 cutting-edge media art exhibitions showing the work of pioneering artists active internationally. Her thematic exhibitions at MoMA included, for example, the exhibition called Soundings, a contemporary score from 2013, Looking at Music from 2009, Video Spaces from 1995, among many others. Some of her most recent projects are the ongoing exhibition Seeing Sound, which started in 2020, that explores the current trajectory of sound as a dynamic branch of contemporary art practice. The podcast series Barbara London Calling, starting in 2020, that hosts conversation with pioneering artists from all over the world, and her referential book called Video Art, The First 50 Years, which traces the history of video art. As a teacher, she lectures at the Sound Art Department of Columbia University. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo. I'm thrilled to be here. I want to thank so many people. I've been in Uruguay for almost 2 weeks, met wonderful artists, wonderful curators, and people like Leo on my very first evening. So it's a great honor to be here. And we have a beach party going on, so tune your ears to this way and we'll roll. Let's see. So I'm just going to do a few slides that talk about my background so that you have a sense of where I've come from. And then Leo and I are going to really get into sound art. So I started working at MoMA in the early 70s. I was a baby. Right out of graduate school. And I love to put this up because art in our time is a very difficult thing because we're always growing, changing, technology changes, concepts changes, culture changes, the world changes. So how do we do that? It's not very easy. So I know we have museum directors and we have curators here and collectors, and it's a lot of work, but worth it every minute. So one of the first artists I met when I started out at MoMA was Namjoon Paik, and I met him on a bus, if you can believe that. But Namjoon is considered one of the pioneers of video. But Namjoon had his foot in music. He played the piano as a kid and did many, many things. But I show this only because artists, many of you are artists who are present, and you're unbelievably international. And I think Leo, as a scholar, is international as well. And we get ideas when we travel and we sponge up information. What is sound art? Sound art is many, many, many things, and we're going to touch on this. But one of the areas that's very big in Germany and has been for a while is what's called Klangkunst. It's, knock it about and make a sound out of an object. And Namjoon certainly did that in 1963. And I joke and I say, this is interactive art before there was a name for interactivity. Because you, the public, could come up and knock these bits and pieces together of old detritus, old junk. And people like Paik and others whom we'll talk about, they took all of the gear apart, they tore it apart, they figured out what was the electronic signal. And it was sound and it was image. And maybe Paik doctored up a TV. He doctored up what was appearing in the mass media, and that was a press conference with Nixon. And this was early audio gear and early video gear, and it was very difficult to thread and rewind. So when I started out, it was instant everything. We had Polaroid, we had instant orange juice, instant soup. We had eventually the audio cassette, and artists like the group, music group Television was playing. And this is to show you early gear was complicated to manipulate and work with. You had to thread it up, and it was all about the present. It was about now. So Paik, I love Paik. I loved Paik. He passed away sadly, but he said, "How did you learn video?" I invented it. I finished with electronic music. Therefore, I had to do something. I was neither a good painter nor a sculptor nor a good composer, and there was no competition. So how do you make art? That's very complicated. He created a processor and then was able to colorize black and white video, which was only what television, commercial television, was able to do. I was a very young, curious soul. I lived in New York, and I went to places like the Fillmore East to see what was going on with electronic tools in conjunction with a music event at the Fillmore. I knew very early Bill Viola, who came out of Syracuse University and is an artist who really tinkered, really played with the electronic signal. So anyway, this is just to show you what Bill was doing way back in the 70s. And Leo and I have talked a lot about interdisciplinary exploration. So Bill played drums and was very into music and worked a little bit with David Tudor, a very important composer who did music for Merce Cunningham and other people. But it's all of this cross-disciplinary kind of exploration. I'm going to move on faster so we can get into. I'm right now working on a show with Dara Birnbaum, a fascinating artist who's had a long career. She's my age. I won't tell you my age, but anyway, she's had my age. And anyway, in 1977-78, she was looking at mass media, thinking of the representation of women, and took the idea of Wonder Woman, which was a cartoon, cartoon. Anyway, so how she dealt with sound. Let's see if I can get this to go. So anyway, we can think of the past and the present, and I think we're all involved with art. What is art? What is contemporary practice? So here's Dara working with a television program, the representation of women in that TV series and in the cartoon. A secretary becomes a superhero, and then the special effect that was available then. I'm going to move on. So we can get into our conversation. I've always been interested in how artists communicate and share ideas. And then at MoMA, I had an exhibition space where I could do various things. So here I'm looking at the interaction between artists and musicians. So I won't go into the whole nitty gritty, but I had Africa Bombata, I had craft work. I was thinking about how Black culture, white culture, downtown New York culture, all of these systems were really interacting one with another. So then I get into what we're really
Yes,
going to talk about.
one of the issues I find particular in sound art is this difficult to classify the types of artwork. For example, some works are interactive, other are reactive, other had to do with immersive devices and all that. So, considering your career, your work as curator, how did you deal with this issue, this almost impossibility to classify sound artworks when you had to choose works for an exhibition? I mean, with this, not only the technical, the type of art, sound artwork or the device, but also considering the possible thematics, political, gender, ecological. How do you manage to select these possible works around the world, because you have worked with artists from all around?
It's very difficult. I was very fortunate. It was I'd been at MoMA 38 years when I proposed this exhibition, and I got the green light, and then I worked 2 years to pull the show together. I thought about many things about sound art as a category, that it's quite vast, but how to take that work and put it in a white cube space, and how to give you an audience an experience that made sense. Bottom line, no headphones. That was immediate, no headphones. I wanted a more community experience. I wanted to reflect the diversity of what was going on. I had a binder that my interns helped me with of over probably 500 artists. And it was really difficult to I had an exhibition designer. We met every 2 weeks with the whole team and thought about space, how many pieces I could put in, how I would soundproof walls, and I wanted diversity to the way the work would be experienced by the visitor. So it had a real range of material. So let me go forward. So this is a work of Sergei Chepnin, and it's a New York subway bench, an old discarded subway bench. Through bone conduction, you sit down and the composition goes through your butt. It goes through the bones in your butt, and then you hear the composition. I won't go into all the stories that go behind that. And then Tristan Parrish, this is his work called Microtonal Wall, which is it's 1,500 one-bit processors. So you, the visitor, walked along this composition and interacted. I won't go into the sound. And then
Sorry, Barbara. This work, I find it particularly interesting. The other day we were talking about this work. I find it very interesting because it shows this particularity of the sound art work that only sound can provide. It's a work. It's an interactive work. So each person has a different experience depending on where he's located, where he or she is located. And this is a very particular issue in sound art that with visual art is maybe we can do an analogy with some sculptures that change when you turn around and look at the other perspective. but this is like the same in sound. You can really construct and the piece depending on where you are located. Huh?
Yeah, you're constructing your experience. And I
Your
always would
your
say
experience.
to people, you standing in front of a painting, what you ate for breakfast is going to affect maybe how you see the work, the painting. Or you had a bad day or argument with your spouse, and that's going to flavor. So I think every work of art and the personal experience is going to be different for everybody. And so he understood this in a composition that you could go down below, the speaker is up above. You're composing your experience with what he has there. So I like that very much. I could look at a Goya at the Prado for 2 hours and see all these details, or I could acoustically listen to this. Yeah. The good point.
It's a good example of the richness of sound art.
Yeah, very. So another work I thought in this exhibition, because sound art is so many things. So Camille Normand took a microphone, a very ordinary microphone that Billie Holiday, a singer, might have sung used, but she took out the insides and she put in a light and she programmed it. So it's the pulse of a heartbeat. So you think of song, you think of speech, it comes from the inside. So in a way, I loved that this was very physical, and the light, the way it reflected and pulsated, was like a rib cage. So it made the visitor walking by think, I hope, a bit about voice and the person.
Even if it has no sound.
Yeah.
It's a sound art
Exactly.
work without sound.
Exactly. So it's more of a conceptual sound art piece. Yeah, good point. Another artist I put in the show, and we really thought a lot about the install. The walls had soundproofing. This is a very elegant, minimal piece. It's a composition that she adapted from Pavel Haas, who wrote it in 1943. He was interned in a concentration camp by the Nazis, and the piece was performed once, and he and all of the orchestra were killed, but one survived. And it's a very haunting work where you hear through those speakers on the wall, and they're very simple speakers. You hear out of his symphony one string cello and one viola. So there's something very poetic. I'll just use an anecdote. Some of the Philharmonic people came to look at the show. They were the first people I saw stand right up close to the speakers. You know, I tried to make it as inviting as possible, but they were the ones who went right up to the speakers. So I think sound art in an institution, people think, oh yeah, normally a museum is visual. And I had to think a lot about putting this work in a predominantly visual institution to make it comfortable, to provide diversity to the way the work looked, and the people also, the artists also, diversity to their practice.
So that this is a real challenge to put these sound art works in exhibition spaces, galleries. It's like a double challenge. You have to have the sound issue and the visual issue, and you have to make both. Find like a middle point there.
Yeah. So it was truly walking a fine line. So I hope you get to hear that fully. I'm sorry. I'm teasing you with images and sounds. Because we have so much to talk about. Carson Nicolai is a very interesting artist out of Berlin who really thinks a lot about the physicality of sound. Up on the top is a water trough, and probes are into the water. They're pulsating. So what you see are the patterns that these. There's a mirror behind, and it then shows you the patterns. So Carson is an artist who's very involved with imaging, patterning in nature, and so if it's like the physical representation of sound. Marco Fusionato is an interesting Australian artist who represented Australia in Venice this last summer, last iteration. His installations usually are incredibly loud. So I only had drawings, but the drawing is you can look at it and it's totally noise. So he took a Yanis Xenakis score, drew a line from every note on the score to the center, and it would be a cacophony if you heard all of that played all at once. So I wanted the difference in the work so the visitor could have different kind of experience. So Harun Mirza's was, there's a little table and there's the Mondrian painting in the MoMA collection, and those little diodes around the side are what are kind of triggering the sound, and the light, it's like a bicycle light is pulsating. So it's an interesting visualization of sound, but it's MoMA after all, and it's like he's inspired by Mondrian. And fortunately, Ann Timken allowed me to put that in the gallery. So I worked at MoMA a long time, so I knew all my fellow senior curators, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And this is, for those of you who are Uruguayan, this is a wonderful artist, Uruguayan born, lives in New York. So this is a piece that Richard did with basically trash that he found. An amplifier, a speaker cabinet, turntable, and then the glass marble he bought. So it's almost like Sisyphus. Sisyphus trying to push the boulder up the mountain. Here's this little marble on the upside down turntable, forever and ever and ever, rolling around and around. And the visitor heard the sound of that of the marble. So Christine Sun Kim, actually a deaf sound artist who's very involved with language and the musical notation, the signing of the deaf, and written word. So the three combined. So
about these works, thinking about this Richard Garrett one, that basically it's an physical object that's it's an analog device. It's a pickup, just capturing the vibration of a physical object. And on the other side, these other works that use recordings, digital recordings, that finally you listen through speakers. I see like two types of the more physical sound installation and the more virtual, like sounds coming from speakers. Do you see like maybe a trend in one type of work or the other, or have you seen, in your experience, the artists working with sound art actually in the last years are using more electronic devices, digital networks, or maybe coming back to this type of analog taking objects and I'm thinking also about an Uruguayan artist, Diego Masi, that he works with similar things like this.
Yeah. I think it's both. You know, I don't think we can say it's more one or the other. I think it's both. I think because we're always going to have, with the latest, newest digital, there are going to be people who say, no way, or there's such a hype around that. So they go back, like Richard, to this. But Richard is someone who also deals with the digital and turns the digital into the visual. So this is certainly visual and thought out.
Because this type of work maybe could have been done 40, 50 years ago. And but I find like there's an interest in coming back to this type of work.
It could have been done 40 years ago, but people might have said, so what? Yeah, because that was the here and now. That was what a very advanced rock group would have used. The speakers, the system would have been then state of the art. Now it's trash. And so that's the point, is there nostalgia or is it, not sure. Hope I answered.
Yes, it was like I was having these questions. I wanted to know what you thought about it.
It's good. It's good.
Thank you.
So this is Yonda Winderen, an artist who works a lot with nature, and I know nature is very important, especially as we think about our world. So she's gone to the ends of the earth to record under the water and above. So in this installation in a dark room, and this is something we were talking about before. So anyway, you walked into a dark room, some light, but it felt okay because there was a little bit of light. And there were 16 speakers and a subwoofer. And as you sat there, the sound started underwater, moved up to the surface of the water, and then moved up into the air. And it was the echolation of bats. And so she took that sound that bats make in their cries, that sound of their movements and the echolation, and brought it down to audible levels. So it almost sounded like the whale, the whale speech. But so it's a 16-minute, 16-minute composition. I was fascinated that people actually stayed and listened and paid attention. I tried to make it an inviting environment with soft seat. Again, for the deaf, I had wiring under the carpet. They could tune their hearing aid to hear all of the sounds. It was pumped up slightly. So that was something very special working at MoMA, to be able to work with the education department and think about not just the hearing audience, but the deaf audience. So, yeah.
Like an inclusive sound art.
And what?
In some
Inclusive,
sense,
yeah.
in some sense.
Trying to be inclusive.
Yeah, that's interesting issue, huh? Because I think sound art, it's not, as we said some moments ago, not all sound art works mean that there has to be physical sound. There can be an idea of the sound, mental idea of sound. And I think in that way, sound art can be very inclusive.
Inclusive,
yes.
Yeah. It was fascinating to watch the MoMA public, because one day I walked into that space with someone and I was telling them about the piece, and someone literally told me to shut up because I was so happy they were really listening. I thought, oh, I better be more careful. So I was very happy. this is a work of Stephen Viciello, who took, I forget how many sounds of bells from around New York, from a cat bell to a church bell to many, many bells. And I got my colleagues at MoMA to allow me to put this piece in the MoMA garden. I stepped down from MoMA after 40 years and decided I would write a book. And that took me a little while to put together, but I did. And I'm very happy it sold out within a year. They had to republish. So then along came COVID, and I thought, well, what now do I do? And I thought, well, I will do a podcast series. And fortunately, the first 12 artists I invited, I raised the money quickly. I was very fortunate. And the first 12 artists agreed to speak with me. So that included Didem Pekun, who's born in Turkey, lives in Berlin. Marina Rosenfeld, who's phenomenal, lives in New York. Bonnie Heikel, who's in Singapore, a fantastic artist. And Genesis de Andrade from Brazil. So each one was in their home. I was in my home. I had a wonderful production crew, and we were in dialogue. And we recorded, and then the production team edited it. So it sounds like we're in the same room, but we weren't. So that's what technology can do. So what was my theme? The first one, it was some up-and-coming artists, but it was Henri Sola and a whole bunch of others, yeah. So the artists, I feel fortunate, and we can talk about this, how connection is so important. Now I'm here, I've been connecting with different artists, and it's all cumulative, my knowledge, you're sharing with me of who you are, and that all enters into then how I move forward, I think. I'll just keep going. VR, that's something. Reggie Keita I met when he was like 20. So the artists I've been in dialogue with, many I go way back with them. I'll just go on so we can talk a little more. Raphael Lozano Hammer. Very interesting artist who works with technology and with sound. And then now, just to the last, I have a show that is going to go on the road. I was very fortunate. I raised all the money from Nokia to put this together. And ICI, which distributes exhibitions, accepted it right away. So it's got a range of artists from Colombia, from Hong Kong, from England, from New York, from Japan, Singapore, England, blah, blah. So that's Marina Rosenfeld's, which is a very physical but very visual. So there are microphones and speakers, and there's a kind of feedback. And Juan Cortez from Bogota, an installation that's really thinking about astronomy. Hard to tell that. This a duo, Forsyth and Pollard, thinking about old technology and the radio, what we no longer use. We use our cell phones, don't we, for sound? We're on the cell phone all the time. And Orasats, a very beautiful work that is actually a conversation between the composer Paulino Oliveros and Laurie Siegel. And it's a very beautiful, beautiful work. And using the old telephone as the listening device. And Yuko Mori, Bonnie Heikel. And then where do we go? I think it's very positive. I'm an optimist always. So Ori Harvey did internet work early in the '80s, and now is doing a lot with VR and net art. She's a great software programmer. And then I'm very happy Lukasz Kuna is here. This is his very beautiful work that was in Tbilisi, and the whole physical experience of sound. And it's an octave from F to E, and I don't have all of the technical fully in my vocabulary at the moment, but I think it's to show you with art can be in sound art can be in a public space and can invite the public to come in and express themselves, to hear themselves in this chromatic scale that is represented by the space going from smaller to larger. So in Montevideo, I also met Diego Massi, another sound artist from Uruguay, who's been very active and very important for the field. I also met Brian McCarran, who is really a net art pioneer, but is also involved also with sound. So, and where do we go from here? I don't know. We've got the Web3 here, and the artist toolkit gets smaller and smaller. You teach and you have your students and you work with all of the gear.
Well, I think one of the challenges here with sound art is that it as you, I think you have mentioned this impossibility to classify, to define the ways in which sound can be present in a work, in an artwork, because as you have shown in all these examples, sometimes it's old technology, sometimes it's new technology, sometimes it's a mix of both. Sometimes it's just a physical object resonating, like Lucas' works that explore this architectural space resonation. And but I think all these aspects make the richness of sound art. Even it defies, and it's one of the things you have written about also, it defies the concept of museum, the exhibition space, because sound is everywhere. So a sound art can be just a place in space, and an artist that proposes a sound, an artwork that proposes just to listen in some place at some moment. No? So I think it's very interesting how you have shown all these different aspects of based on your own experience and contact with so many different artists, and I really see a complex work you have done, trying to understand these different issues, because every art, it's like, I don't know, as you went on with your exposition, I was thinking about this impossibility, as I mentioned some moments ago, the impossibility to define this concept sometimes. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand what is the medium, what is the way in which sound is present in an artwork.
So it's hard to say, is it a medium, is it a field? And it's always going to change. And it's always going to change depending upon who's doing it. And I always would say definitions are terrible, because definitions have to be redefined. They work for a moment, they're a handle, but you have to redo them, because nothing is permanent. And that's what life is. The technology keeps changing, or you as a scholar and the wonderful artists who are here, your ideas are always going to be pushing pushing the limits and pushing people like me to like. And then I love to teach because then I say to students, I'm an older generation, so I want to know what your codes are. What's your vocabulary? So teaching, it's a two-way. I'm taking from you and I'm giving you.
So, Barbara, I think we have like 10 minutes. I think if it's okay for you, we can
Yeah.
open the floor for some questions.
Mine is more thank you to Barbara for her generosity. I've had the pleasure to listen to you for many years. And what I'm always surprised is that you're always humble before the universe. You're always ready to be surprised, and you're always willing, as you said, to be a sponge of everything, not only the young. And that is an attitude that I think we all probably are inspired by you. And I think you're an incredible scholar and an incredible example and attitude for life and a way of being in the world and in the arts. And I just have a huge thank you, hopefully on behalf of many of us here. So thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Victoria. That means a lot to me. Victoria is a director of the museum in Buenos Aires, and we know each other from a long time ago. So
I was especially caught by your Namjoon Paik and your Bill Viola very early, because you've been in touch with so many incredible artists from all generations, from all over the planet. And I was wondering if you wanted to share with us, hopefully, a few Uruguayan artists or South American artists that have inspired you recently or in your very beginnings. So, whatever from this region you want to share with us, that would be wonderful.
well, I have to say that one of the very first artists from Latin America, that we talk about the continent. I actually, when I started the video exhibition program, I was in the print department, and Annabella Geiger came through. Walter Zanini came through, the director in Brazil, and he said to me, "You have to meet Annabella Geiger," and Annabella came. So here's this woman who is like so full of life, so full of ideas, and kind of wacky, and just unbelievable. So yeah, she inspired me for sure. And then I got MoMA to give me a travel grant to go 2 times. I'd already been to Latin America, to Brazil in the 70s, and then I went down in the early 80s. And I didn't get to Uruguay then, but yeah. So yeah, I met amazing people. I met Ligia Clark. I met all these people. I can't tell you who I met. Gego, I met them all. And it was like, oh my God. These are brilliant people. And there I was, like a baby curator, and they look at me like, "You're here from MoMA?"
Barbara, thank you for this exposure. It was fantastic. I was just wondering, one of the works from Christine Sam Kim called my attention, but that made me think about all the rest of the artworks were specifically chosen for this show. Were they specifically made for the show? Some of the artists had them already.
That's a very good question. In the last show that the last 2 shows I was showing you, Soundings, a contemporary score in 2013, the works all existed. So I worked for almost 3 years on that show. I was doing research, and then I had the go ahead to do it, and then I had my interns. We assembled a big book of everybody we could think of, and then I honed in, and it was indeed, your question is good. It was pretty much work that existed. No, Jana Winderens was new. So she had an idea for something amazing, and I said, you have to tone it down. I don't have that budget. So, yeah, but we worked it out. We worked it out well. And the new show that ICI is circulating, I had one artist who created a new work, and I, made studio visits, and I said, no, that doesn't work. And that show at MoMA, it had a big footprint, so it was relatively large. But for this show for ICI that is touring, I very specifically chose smaller scale work. So it could go to university galleries. It's going to go to Pratt in New York within a couple of months. So yeah, so it's meant for smaller institutions. It could come to Latin America if somebody wanted it.
Klangkunst in German, sound art in the Western countries, and arte sonoro. It's relatively new here, even more new than sound art and Klangkunst. Klangkunst, sound art and arte sonoro es un género bastante nuevo, no tan nuevo, pero we could say in South America we work it since 30, 40, 50 years. In Uruguay, I would say since 20 years. This term is existing as a possibility to explore. And this is actually the term, which is so interesting, explore. And it was so wonderful how you gave an entrance on the example of Namjoon Paik. He said, there is actually not so much existing yet. So all what I will do this will be somehow have an impact. And Leo just said already, sound is everywhere, and sound gives us always an impact. But I want to mention something. When you curated the exhibition in the MoMA, and I told you this, you changed the world in somehow, but you changed it in this way that after this manifestation, I want to say it like this, it was clear sound is absolute en vogue now. So it was clear, so sound is the thing to do at the moment. We did it a long time before and heavily and strong, but this was, and I want to say thank you, because then it was clear that we are not in a corner, that we are not aiming for something or we're pretending something. We are actually working on a field which have to do with perception, which have to do with ourself, which have to do with our daily being, with our well-being as well, with our understanding, with our consciousness, no? And I don't want to monopolize here, but I want to invite you and ask you and tell you again this wish. You showed the work from Laurie Anderson very, very fast. You skipped it. The headphone radio table, which is a very emblematic piece in between sculpture, participative, very simple. Everybody can understand it. Everybody can get the message. And I have a wish, actually. It would be really super fantastic to have one day an exhibition in Central South America, wherever this will be, which shows emblematic pieces, how it started, no? So some pieces from Namjoon Paik, some pieces from Viola, and so many to tell, but really like the classics, that we don't miss this this in-between step, yeah, because it came from something. Everybody of them, they came from something. A lot of them, they came from music, interpretation, composition, visual arts, or they tried to find their new space. And actually what we have now is arte sonoro, sound art, Klangkunst. we have a totally beautiful new horizon to work, and there's so much to do. So again, Barbara, thank you so much, and also thank you to Laura, which is probably not here now, that she was inviting you, because I tried to catch you up last year already when you were ready to come here, and this is very important. Again, a sound arte sonoro is something, it's hot now in South America.
Yeah, thank you. So it's fantastic to be here, and I'm so happy that Laura and Mercedes from the Black Art Gallery and the film exhibition that I also participated in, both of them really are the ones who invited me, and Laura is the the little dynamo for putting ESTE ARTE together. So yeah, the two are very special people, as all of you are. Was there one more question? Did you want to ask one?
I think there was one more question.
Maybe I lost it. No, I was interested because I did a lot of things between art and sound for years. I was a musician before, so I came back to art after, and I did also sound art. But I think it's interesting because I think it's more usually in music, it's more something that people do together. I mean, art is more something that you do alone, and I think sound art has also this, or art that deals with sound, maybe not sound art specifically, but art that deals with sound as more this specificity of being something that you maybe will do with some other people, because there's technology involved, people involved, space involved, architecture involved. And suddenly when you do sound art or you do art with sound, suddenly it becomes a little bit more like doing a film maybe, or something like this. And I wonder if in a museum, because we recently did a show in Proa in Buenos Aires about that was a little bit dealing with sound. And I think you always have to deal with this problem of how this can be together in the same space, no? Because you have loud sounds, noisy sounds, very fine sounds, and I can imagine the difficulty of doing something in MoMA with such a different type of sounds coming out, and some needs very silent spaces, others need more trashy. And it's interesting when you talked about the Australian one that we saw at the Venice Biennale that was really loud. Yeah. And I can imagine you made a very good choice by picking the the images and not the sound for letting the frogs and the nightlife in the other room. I wonder how all this comes in when you put how many works together.
Well, thanks for the question. I really thought a lot about it, and I thought a lot about it for several years. And then normally MoMA gives you, if you're doing a big show, the exhibition designer 6 months before. I said, no, you have to tell me who it is now, 2 years before, because I want to sit down with them and the AV crew and, and start to hammer out how we're going to do this. So I thought through all those things, and every 2 weeks I had a meeting with them and thought it through. And then I brought in the education department, for the hard of hearing or whatever, that came later. And then always at MoMA, I was very enterprising. So I had a budget. I had Pauline Oliveros perform in the garden and she had never performed there before. So that was part of what I did. And then I decided I wanted to do a film program. So then I went to Rajinder Raj, who's the film curator, chief curator. I said, okay, Raj, I want to do a film program in your space. He said, okay. And I said, and I want it to be your budget. And he said, okay. So those are the things I did, because it's like, yeah, the physical space, we thought it through really carefully. But then I wanted Pauline Oliveros there, because she mentored so many people in thinking about what is sound and what is performance and what is, space. So, yeah. And then I told Ann Temkin, you got to take down that painting in the stairwell because I'm going to put a sound piece there. It's like, so she agreed. And then it was like, oh, so yeah. So I felt this was my last show at MoMA and everybody was very generous. So I was able to do a lot of things. So, and I think, yes, the question is good that Glenn Lowry, MoMA was evolving. It always is evolving. So the curatorial, long ago when I started, curatorial were little fiefdoms. They were very argumentative heads of curatorial departments. But by now, they're all in dialogue. And it's a very wonderful, more fluid. And that's the way the world is. We have to talk to one another. We have to understand that architecture, I know there are some architects here, that sound in space has a lot to do with how we're defining the space, how the public moves through the space, how they're in public space. Yeah. And it's very exciting always to have these dialogues.
Thank you, Barbara, very much. I think we are at the end. I'm very happy for this opportunity to get to know you, to have this conversation, and thank you very much for sharing your experience with everybody. I want to thank also Laura Bardier for the invitation, and ESTE ARTE also, and thank you everybody for your participation. And thank you very much.
So thank you, Leo, for agreeing to engage with me. So I think you were the right choice that Laura made. I think it was great. And I think everything we begin, we have to start somewhere. So I've met many people on this trip, and I hope we continue the conversation.
I hope so. Thank you.